Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and this one may ruffle some feathers, but then again, most of my videos do. And today's topic is, who were the Neanderthals? Many Christians will bristle at the mention of the word Neanderthal because most of us have been brought up to picture Neanderthals as cavemen and really primitive ape-type beings that are used to support the evolutionary theory. So when it comes to bringing up the word Neanderthal or the people, we could say Neanderthals, a lot of Christians don't want to deal with it because they think that it is trying to be used to disprove the Bible. And you know what? It is. A lot of people try to use Neanderthals and all of the other made up things to try to disprove the Bible. But my question today is, what if we could actually use the Neanderthals to prove the Bible? So before I even get into my thoughts on who the Neanderthals could possibly have been, and remember this series is about speculation. It's about questioning things. It's called Question the Narrative for a reason. It is not called Solve the Narrative because most of the questions that I ask, we will not get the answers to this side of heaven, but they're fun to think about. But yeah, let's think about who the Neanderthal man was not. He was not an ape man. That's for sure. And this is actually from the book Pre-Flood by Trey Smith. It's actually called The True History of Your World Pre-Flood. And I've actually done a review on these books, but I took a photo of this page and I'm going to just go over it with you because he gives a really good synopsis of who Neanderthals actually were, at least physically, and what science has done to manipulate that. So it says early Neanderthal skulls were very often released to the public with missing nose bones, like the La Chapelle skull to the right. Okay, so you notice there's no nose bone there. Removing the nose bone can make a human skull look monkey-like a primate. However, over time, too many skulls were found and not all could be removed. Neanderthals were drawn and covered with modeling clay to look as monkey men. And if you go to the Smithsonian, our favorite place, that's what they'll look like if you see them there. They'll look like monkey men. Neanderthals are ancient humans, bone for bone. In fact, not only were they not monkey men, but like everything in the ancient world, particularly before the flood, they were thicker, far stronger, had larger brains, and lived far longer than we do today. Also, they were far better looking and more physically fit than we could dream of. We are a diminished version of our fathers and ancestors that lived much before us. Much effort from evolutionists went into making these ancient ancestors, such as the likes of Nimrod, Noah, Enoch, or Adam, and the sons and daughters and generations thereof, look like primates. The skull on the bottom right is what a Neanderthal skull actually looks like with the nose bone intact. So these are both Neanderthal skulls, and you can see the difference in when the nose bone is removed. It does look like a primate, and here the nose bone has not been removed, and it is clearly human. And I will leave a link in the description box to this book and any other books that I might mention. So I decided to just do a quick search on Neanderthal and human skulls, and if you notice, this is exactly what Trey Smith was talking about. So on the right is the skull of a, quote, modern human, and as you can tell, the nose bone is intact. And on the left is the skull of a, quote, Neanderthal, and coincidentally, the nose bone has been removed. And this is something that these people do over and over because they need to falsely support their narrative. So now that I've given you just a brief look at how they have changed a lot of the Neanderthal skulls to make them look more ape-like and how they have used that to create their own definition for what they were, I'm going to get into two theories on that I came up with that these Neanderthals possibly could have been. Now, clearly, Trey Smith thinks that they are ancient humans, which I believe that they are a form of ancient human as well. What form, I'm not sure of, because again, I have two theories, and we'll talk more about Trey Smith's theory second. But the first one that I'm going to talk about is this. Is it possible that the Neanderthals were the people created on day 6. And I know that a lot of you don't like when I talk about the people of day 6. I'm not saying that I 100% believe that this is the case, but I think that it's something that is certainly worth looking into. And in order to do that, first of all, let me just explain to you why I think it is a possibility. So in Genesis chapter 1, starting with verse 26, it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. So first of all, let's just point out that according to this verse right here, it certainly seems like they were created in multiples. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. And he blessed them, and he told them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Okay, and if you go back and look at all of the days, you will see that before he created man on day 6, he created vegetation. And he also created animals before he created the people of day 6. So now let's go to what it says about in Genesis 2. And we're going to start right down here. "When no bush of the field was yet in the land." Okay, so this is before the plants have come in this area. Okay, "And no small plant of the fields had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain in the land, and there was no man to work the ground." So here it's mentioning working the ground. "And a mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden, in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord God made to spring up every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." So the way that Genesis 2 is written, it sounds like Adam was created before the trees and the plants, and that he was placed in the Garden of Eden after those things were formed. But he was formed first. So now we go down to verse 15. "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. Then the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him. Now out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them." So again, I'm asking you here, it says, now out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field. So in Genesis 2, were the beasts that were in the fields of the Garden of Eden created after Adam? Whereas in chapter 1, it tells us that the animals were created before man and woman were created there. So those are just some things to think about. And in chapter 1, it does give a very general depiction of how male and female were created, and man and woman. And yes, again, it seems like it was done in plurality, and they were immediately given the command to be fruitful and multiply. and that was not given to Adam and Eve until later. But in chapter 2, it specifically tells us that Adam was formed out of the ground, and the Lord breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, and then Eve came out of his rib, and that was after the Lord just deemed that it was not good for Adam to be alone. But in chapter 1, again, it seems that they were all created at the same time. So yes, I'm going to say it again. I think there is definitely a possibility that there were two separate creations of people, and possibly even different types of people in general. And my question again is it possible that the ones created on day 6 could have been the Neanderthals, the evidence of these Neanderthals that we see so much of? I read in Gary Wayne's book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, that I mention here all the time, that the Sumerians actually considered themselves to be the first people that were created. And they called themselves the Blackheads, which I find to be very interesting. And I got to thinking, though, what of the verse in Acts that says that all of the nations come from one blood? And let me go there right now. Acts 17, verse 26 says, "And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings." And actually, I came across this verse as I was reading it when I was doing devotions with my children the other day. And I was like, he has made from one blood every nation of men. And I thought to myself, that's actually a pretty good verse to use to debunk the day 6 people, because it's telling us right here that every nation has come from one blood, meaning the blood of Adam. But then I got to thinking as I was reading The Magician's Nephew, and I know that C.S. Lewis has a bit of a shady past, and so we don't quite know what to make of him. What we do know is that he was an adept, and that he knew things that most people do not know. And I'm starting to wonder if he did become a believer after being an adept, and that he was writing these allegories to Christians to reveal things to us that he knew. I don't know. But in the book, The Magician's Nephew, towards the end, it tells us that the new king of Narnia had a son, and that his son, and I might have been more than one child, but I definitely remember that they had a son. And it says that he went and he married the nymphs. Okay, it doesn't say that like he married brothers or sisters or anything. It says that he married the nymphs. And I thought to myself, well, we're still not really sure of who Cain married, right? So we're often told that Cain went off to Nod and he must have married his sister because there was no one else there. But Genesis specifically tells us that Cain and Abel were born. Abel was murdered by Cain. Cain was then sent to live in the land of Nod, where he found his wife, or with his wife. And then it says that Seth was born. Okay? And then after Seth, it says that he had other sons and daughters. And so everyone says, well, they had other sons and daughters. Well, it specifically tells us that first they had Cain and Abel, and then they had Seth, and then they had other sons and daughters. So if Cain was already banished even before Seth was born, at least if I am reading it properly, where would these other people have come from? That's my question. And if they had other sons and daughters, why would none of them have been mentioned by name? I don't know. And I know that a lot of people believe that the book, the Bible itself, is actually written specifically for the line of Adam. Because there are people, yes, who believe that the day 6 people are not the people of Adam. But we have verses like Acts, I'm sorry, was it Acts 17? Isn't that terrible? I already forgotten. I just read it. Yeah, Acts 17, telling us that all the nations came from one blood. Well, how could that be if there are two separate creations? Well, if Cain went and married someone, could it have been one of these day six people? Possibly. We even have movies like The Croods, right? Which I could never stand this movie just because I hate the way that they have all of these characters like lumbering around like they're gorillas, like with their long arms dragging on the floor. It irritates me. But I thought this was a really good depiction because the Neanderthals clearly had a different bone structure than what we do today. So if we would have two separate types of creations that were still compatible, could it be that here we have this character who we could, just for today, look at as being of the line of Adam, okay? And then we could have her. She could have been from the day six creation. Clearly, two separate body types, but compatible. And is it possible that that is how the one nation comes into play because they then started interbreeding? And the question is that is it possible that Noah's sons' wives may have had some of this day six blood in them? And I know a lot of times we will talk about, is it possible that Noah's sons' wives had some Nephilim DNA in them? And I think that that is possible too. But I also wonder if they may have had some day six, or if it's possible some Neanderthal DNA in them. And you might be wondering, well, why are you so focusing on this Neanderthal? Well, because people today are still found to have this Neanderthal DNA in their body, and it must have come from somewhere. So is it possible that that is how it survived? Yet, since it is all intermixed, the nations are still coming from one blood, from the lineage of Adam. And the book of Genesis tells us that Noah was pure in his generations. And a lot of people take that to mean his entire family. But it doesn't say that. It just says Noah was pure in his generations. So do I think that it's possible that maybe, and when I'm saying pure, right now I'm speaking more of Nephilim. And I know that it gets so confusing between Nephilim, day six people, and you really kind of have to really focus in order to keep everything, you know, from not getting all jumbled up like I'm doing it right now. But if Noah was pure in his generations, it doesn't necessarily mean that his entire family was. Now, they could have been. I'm not saying that they weren't, but someone must have taken some form of tainted DNA over, if this theory is correct, that the Neanderthal were a different type of ancient human. And in fact, if the Nephilim blood, if the Nephilim continued to uh, regenerate, is that the word? They just kept coming after the flood, and that is one theory. They came through Noah's sons' wives. So that's one thing that I wanted to clear up, though, is that it just says that Noah was pure in his generations. So that I think is important to think about. So this is a really good video with Gary Wayne, the author of the Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and David Carrico. I know him from The Midnight Ride. I do know that he has another channel. I cannot remember what it is off the top of my head. This is a phenomenal video where they are actually discussing the sixth day man and the pre-Adamite race. And honestly, I was surprised to see David Carrico talking about this. Gary Wayne, not so much because I have his book, so I know what he thinks, but I wasn't sure what David Carrico would think of this. But he also sees much merit in this theory, and they really go rather extensively into why they believe that, yes, the day six people were a separate creation. And they are both very learned men. They have both really studied the word and they have a love for the Lord. And I will leave a link in the description box for this video. I recommend that you watch this interview because it will give you a lot of inside information about it. And really, what Gary Wayne believes is that the people of day six, the way that the Bible describes them, is that they were more of hunter-gatherers, while Adam was created specifically as the farmer, so to speak, of the Garden of Eden. Adam was created specifically to tend the Garden of Eden. And the people of day 6 were more described in the way that Genesis 1:20 from verse 26 on narrates it is, yes, more as hunter-gatherers. It's kind of like be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth, subdue the earth. And whereas Adam is given a different mandate, there are two different mandates, that one for the day 6 people and one for Adam. It is not the same mandate. Okay, now I'm finally going to get into the second theory, and that is the one that I mentioned earlier, that Trey Smith believes, and that is that Neanderthals are actually the original human design. That is the way God designed Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Now, if we look here in another page from this book, we'll just compare the two of them. So it says cranial features of modern man and Neanderthal compared. So we have the brain case shape, the forehead, the brow ridge, the nasal bone projection, cheekbone angulation, the chin, and occipital contour, okay, in the back of the skull there. Neanderthals are bone for bone human skeletons. The only differences are that the bones are thicker, stronger, more durable. The wisdom teeth fit perfectly, and the brain sizes are much larger. They are simply ancient, heavy-duty human skeletons, not dissimilar to the heavy-duty Garden of Eden-style animals we find from the past. And let's face it, when we do find these fossils from that time period, from what we believe to be that time period, if you kind of discard the whole millions and billions of years thing, yes, they were much, much larger in those days. And yeah, so it is very possible that the Neanderthal could have been the original design. And it is still before the breakdown of DNA. And it just says, as if we today are the degenerated, much weaker version of our ancestors. And this would make sense, wouldn't it? I talk about entropy on here all the time. Things break down over time. And as Trey Smith often says, actually, let me show you his channel. I don't think that I showed you yet. That's not the one. Okay, I think that it is this channel right here. I'm pretty sure it's this video where he talks about this, but all of his videos are really fascinating. But basically, he describes in great detail why the Neanderthal, quote, Neanderthal skulls that we see today are actually the ancient humans that are before DNA started breaking down over time. As he said, what we are now is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. And you know, even the science books will tell you that Neanderthal remains have been found to show some evidence of inbreeding, though. And so if that were the case, if it were the case that Cain married his sister and that it was all inbreeding, this may also have contributed also to our DNA breakdown over time. So here's a good side-by-side comparison. All right, we have what they would call modern human and what they would call the Neanderthal. And notice this one, the nose bone was not removed. But we already talked about the thicker skull structure. The fact that all of the teeth can actually comfortably fit in the mouth certainly seems to be closer to what God's design would have been. The brow ridge. Okay, a lot of people will look at this brow ridge and they'll think of it as an ape-like feature, especially the way that they make it all up in the museums when they try to make them look like monkey men. But in fact, the human brow ridge continues to grow as someone ages. So someone who is very, very old would have an extended brow ridge. And we know from the word that before the flood, people lived hundreds and hundreds of years. Methuselah lived 969 years. Can you imagine what his brow ridge would have looked like? So this is something really interesting to think about as well. Were the Neanderthals really just us pre-flood? Now, when you put the two theories kind of up against one another, one of the issues that I came up with is that with the day six people theory, it would make sense that not everyone nowadays exhibits Neanderthal DNA in their blood because it may not have been everyone. I think that it is probably very, very, very interbred. And I know that a lot of articles used to tell you that I think it was Asia and Europe had between 1 and 4% of Neanderthal DNA in them, while the people of Africa had no Neanderthal DNA. I actually have found, though, I found an article today that said that yes, there is even Neanderthal DNA in Africa. And it would make sense, again, because of the interbreeding. And you know that the Neanderthals would have been widely spread. Okay, so that works out. But if the Neanderthals would have been us just pre-flood, wouldn't everyone then have that Neanderthal DNA in them? And then I found this article, which I will link in the description box. This is from BBC.com. It's a long article, so I just kind of took a screenshot of this part. You can read the whole thing if you'd like. But this really has a lot to do with this part right here. Okay, I'm going to just read right here. So often, in fact, that as Neanderthal numbers dwindled towards the end of their existence, their Y chromosomes may have gone extinct and been replaced entirely with our own. This suggests that a substantial number of ancestral human men were doing the deed with female Neanderthals. But the story doesn't end there. Other research has shown that almost exactly the same fate befell Neanderthal mitochondria. So if the mitochondria may have gone extinct of the Neanderthal as it seems the Y chromosome did, could it have just been something that broke down over time with degradation? I don't know. That might also account, though, with the other theory that they were actually two separate creations. And it might be why, again, more people don't have that Neanderthal DNA is not because they don't have it in their blood, but because it's no longer showing up, because it's kind of been bred out of them, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't there in the first place. So I hope that I'm making sense to you because the whole thing can be a bit confusing, but I really enjoyed researching all of this, and I hope that you enjoyed listening. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon feed, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.